Welcome to WKIM Media Network. I'm Marsha Jews, your host, and I'm so excited. We are here talking about body and soul. There's so much going on in the arts community. And with us tonight is, oh my goodness, one of the most incredible women, Joyce J. Scott, who is an American artist, sculptor, quilter, performance artist, installation artist, printmaker, lecturer, educator, named a MacArthur Fellow in 2016 and a Smithsonian Visionary Artist in 2019. She is best known for her figurative sculptures and jewelry using freeform, off loom bead weaving techniques similar to a peyote stitch. Each piece is often constructed using thousands of glass seeds beads or pony beads, and sometimes other found objects or materials such as glass, quilting, and leather. In 2018, she was hailed for working a new medium, a mixture of soil, clay, straw, and cement for a sculpture meant to disintegrate and return to the earth. Scott is influenced by a variety of diverse cultures, including Native American, African traditions, Mexican, Czech, and Russian beadwork, illustration, and comic books and pop culture. You have to look her up. There's so much more. We don't have to, we need the whole evening to hear about it. But let's bring her in. Joyce Scott. Hello. Oh, I'm so excited to see you.
Thank you. Right back at you.
Well, this is really wonderful. Body and Soul is coming up, and you're one of the artists here. And I see you have some of your work in your hand. You always working.
I was working.
You were
I gotta make
working.
$1, girl.
Well,
Start
it
out
also,
for a temp.
I know, I know, but you know what? I knew you were really busy, and you have a lot going on. You're in the middle of a lot of work, but you took the time, and we're just really grateful to be here with you. Let's talk about your art and this upcoming show that's coming on. And it's a big sale with lots of artists. This is exciting.
Well, Olitha Devane started Body and Soul in her studio at Clipper Mill. Oh my God, maybe I don't, it might be 20 years ago by now.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a small exhibition of a few artists and her work. And then we moved, and she and I worked on it a little bit, meaning leading it a little bit. And now Leslie King Hammond is the boss.
You're
Going to
right,
switch
missed the
Body and
doctor.
Well, the great thing about we're going to do it at the Motor House on North Avenue. The
Wonderful.
great thing about Body and Soul is that it is a show selling affordable artwork made by contemporary artists of all ilks right here in Baltimore City, and I should say the state of Maryland.
Mhm.
So, you got jewelry and wearables, paintings, prints, Poncho, the famous Poncho, Sir Poncho, as I call him, will be there, excuse me, with all kinds of artwork. There's just all kinds of artwork. And we get to use Motor House. I was the first artist in residence at Motor House when it opened. Ernest Shaw is the artist in residence there now. So we're getting to use a real arts institution right there on North Avenue, across the street from where I know you hang, Kevin.
Yes. Nancy's with Kevin
Nancy
Brown.
with MAC, the
Yes.
Maryland Institute College of Art. And this is basically, but not only, an exhibition that highlights African American artists. So it's a great way to support that community as well.
Well,
And I'm in it, so
they got to go just because you
well,
there,
know.
queen. So,
Isn't
right.
that terrible when an old woman tries to sound hip? Well, and people are like, don't do that. Don't stop now,
You know
please.
what? We can do what we want to do because we deserve it after all these years and all these gray hairs, right? Let's back into this a little bit because I know that you've been world renowned for a while. You actually just took off. Let's talk about your career, right? And what was it that happened that made that aha moment for you to become an artist?
I used to say that I became an artist in vitro, which is wrong because that means you would take a needle and do something. My parents had sex and had me. So I've been an artist in utero. My mother, Elizabeth Caldwell Talford Scott, is a nationally known quilter fiber artist. And, I am a classic African American girl a roundaway girl from Sandtown, but my parents were sharecroppers in North and South Carolina. Came up during the Great Migration, the latter part of it, to get away from night riders and to have a better life. And so they didn't have a big academic education. They went to one-room schoolhouses. I was blessed to be able and love school, to be able to go to school consistently and have two parents who, because they couldn't have it, were really eager that I should have an education. I always had teachers who saw that sparkle of art in me and would give me supplies to take home in the summertime so I could bring it back to school and show them what I was up to. That happened all the way until senior high school. I went to 132, which was the Coppin Elementary School demonstration school. I can't even remember. It's been in the right after slavery, 1870 or something like that when I graduated. And then I was one of the first students at Lamell Junior High School. Then I went to Eastern High School. And even in high school, Olin Yoder was my art teacher, and he gave me supplies and he helped me to get my scholarship at the Maryland Institute of Art. I'm almost finished.
Take your time.
Where I got my undergraduate degree in education. I thought I was going to be a painter, but they disabused me of that as a freshman, told me to stop painting for the betterment of myself and the entire human race.
Wait a minute, for the betterment of yourself.
Yourself. In essence, they were saying, girl, you can't paint. Why are you out here? They're lying, but you know. And then I got my undergraduate degree in education, and I realized while I was a student teacher that I would become a 700-pound alcoholic if I taught in the Baltimore City public schools. And I have a giant shout out to all the patriots and really, really great teachers who are out there, because any school, whether it's a good school or a bad school, that's a lot of work being around young people 8 hours a day. And then when I came back, I had one job as a drug counselor, because I never was a druggie. I used art as my modality, and it was hippie time, so we painted on walls and we did spoken word, we made artwork. And then when I think I was 24, I said, I'm never working for another person again. I don't know what, I was crazy. My mom and I bought a house, and that was the end of that. I have not, I've been self-employed ever since. That doesn't mean I don't take jobs as a professor or something, but they're all short-term. I call them shotgun things. I go in, I destroy the joint, and then I come home.
But you leave them wanting for more, I'm sure.
One hopes, or wanting for a warrant or something. And that was when I was 24, and I'm 73 years old now, and I've been blessed to have a career that entire time.
73.
Girl, thank God.
Yes. And you know what? I think what's so wonderful about all of this is that your brain goes in a lot of different directions in the mediums that you use. And so you haven't gotten stuck in one area. How does that happen? It's like you're going down a beaded path, and then all of a sudden you go into a whole nother weaving kind of thing, right?
Well, I see it as an art thing. If you talk to artists, a lot of them work in a variety of mediums. They might all inform the one thing they like to do the most, but we're always trying different things. And then you have to, when you add in that smidge about me being an African-American woman with the background I told you about, it was always making a way where there's no way and making something out of nothing. So I was always trying other mediums, milieus, ideas, because they were always, first, I didn't have a lot, but they were also inviting me to learn new things. My mother was my first bead teacher when I was around 5 years old. And when I was in graduate school, I was like a flower child, like a hippie before that, because I was in college in the 60s. And the idea of using translucency, because before that I was a weaver, weaving on a loom, the whole thing. The light didn't pass through. Beadwork made of glass basically allowed me to deal with translucency in my work. And then I learned the peyote stitch from an indigenous woman, and that made everything different because it was just needle, thread, and bead, not needle and a loom or needle embroidering on fabric. Well, I can talk.
Yes, but it's wonderful, and I love everything you're saying. Let's go back to this needle and thread with the beads, because now what we think that the only thing that you can do is make a necklace or a bracelet, but you have taken it to a whole nother level with your beading. How did you get into the sculpturing of that?
Well, it's historically a technique that's used. You can go to Africa, you go to China. Whoops, sorry.
Hmm.
Go just decided to fall over the bloody.
Yeah.
And you can go many places in our world and in history and find that beads have adorned sculpture or body or fabric in a different way more than simply jewelry. For me, I always worked sculpturally, even when I was working as a textile artist. So the idea to be able to use this needle and thread is something other than that. The needle and thread is my passport. It's what my mother gave me, and it's the thing that I use when I travel. And I've been blessed to go around the world, and everybody sews,
Mhm.
somebody sews, and somebody's embroidering on fabric or making a necklace, like you said. When I talked to you about the indigenous wonderful woman who taught me the peyote stitch, this was in 1976, the bicentennial year, and we were in Maine, Deer Isle, Maine, the Haystack Mountain School of Crafts. And I was doing some kind of beadwork, and she said, "Here, try this." And that opened the world of beadwork for me because it allowed me to be as improvisational as I wanted to be. And you know that I'm a singer, a scatter, all those things are very improvisational. So this allowed me to get rid of all of the equipment that you have to have, like a fabric or a loom, and just the needle, thread, and the bead. And then I could work flat, dimensionally, you name it. I could do it. And I have tried, may I add. And so it's just so full.
Mhm.
It's just such a hardy material that I can experiment. I'm sure I'll sit up in my coffin if I allow that to happen.
If, because we know we're not expecting none
Yeah,
of that.
where y'all supposed to be throwing beads in my coffin? What y'all doing?
Mhm.
What
What's
y'all?
up? But you know what else is so beautiful? You've in the travels and in your speaking and in your conversations, how do the young people relate to you and what you're saying, and how do you see them moving in the direction of being more fluid and exploratory with their art?
Well, a lot of when you're young, you are that unless somebody has squelched the hell out of you.
Mm.
I can say one thing about my giving talks. Let me take some water because I'm just like
Please
trying not to.
take your time, because we want you to be comfortable. I'm glad to know that you got a big giant thing, because I got a big giant thing too, and drinking a
And
lot
mine
of water.
was like, but the things without the handle and everything, them old juice jars like your family used to drink out.
Mhm.
I am the worst audience possible.
Mm.
I become 3-year-old Joyce. I like, I design the thing. And I like, if I'm sitting next to you and I hate what's going on, then I'll go in your purse and play, get out of there, Joyce. What's this for? These are plate. What's this? So now I sit on the edge, on the end of the row, so that I won't have to, with my big butt and big breast, pull anybody's hat off or knock their, eyeglasses off. You trying to get out. Okay. I have pledged that I won't be that speaker, that person who drives someone like me uh, in the audience. And
Unless
that,
you get an unction, unless you get an unction.
I just can't even imagine it. Somebody would come up and Will Smith slapped me or something. So I try to have really good images of
Yes.
my work, and I just try to do a really good lecture. So I tell everybody I do everything except shadow puppets, and balloon animals,
Mhm.
right? And I've really been thinking about I should do some balloon animals.
Maybe mix it with a
I
little bit
sing,
of glass
I
or
do
something.
everything. So I know as an audience, if I were in the audience, I'd be going like, what? wow, she really say, wow. And then when the question and answer part comes, people are like, how do you, why would you, who will you, who are you?
Right.
What's wrong with you? You know, they get very enlivened by doing a good lecture. And I think that's very important. After years of being a performer, that's something, I learned with Kayla Wall, that wild one right there. She'll teach you, Mama Kay, how to be a good performer, and Honey Child Milk, Sheila Gaskins, a whole bunch of people. Harriet Lane. Now, the other part of your question is like about young
And how those
people.
young
I think
people go ahead.
well, we're living in such an incredible time where technology allows them to be smarter than I probably would ever be, and easily intelligent, because you can just look up stuff. Now, that doesn't really mean you're intelligent. That just means you can find it. What you do with it
Period.
talks about your intelligence. But I see people who are inventive in ways that would have been harder for me, just because it's at ease. It's, they're carrying an encyclopedia in their purse every day
Mhm.
or in their pocket. I find most people who ask me questions are just so hungry to be able to process and talk about themselves and the important issues through their artwork, that they're always busy, and they have all kinds of questions about medium and also about how you pull it out of yourself.
But in pulling it out of yourself, how do you find that switch, right? In pulling it out of yourself, is
I,
there a
I,
switch?
you look, and this is me. This isn't the Zoom Joyce. This is me. So I don't have a switch. I wish I had an off switch, if you want to know the truth. I have always been an artist. My father and mother were just wild talkers, to lying through jokes.
Mhm.
So this kind of highly activated, motivated kind of creative lifestyle is what is natural to me. And sometimes it's very, very good. Sometimes I am misunderstood and stereotyped to hell, but this is who I actually am. And I've been blessed with being an artist, because you can see me as this person's checking you out in the supermarket. This would be a horrible thing. Well, so I don't have that switch.
Right,
I can
right.
tell you what I do have that I try to employ. Because at 73, I think I know everything.
Mhm.
I'm
Well,
so
you know.
smart, and I've been honored, all of that stuff.
Mhm.
When I go into the studio, I try to push my ego out and submit to the experience of making art. It's the materials, to the zest, the joy, the flow, the rhythm, and just stop being Joyce and be
Mhm.
an artist in that space.
Mhm.
And that is maybe the switch you're talking about. That
Right,
could be it. And I,
right.
I just flow with the work. I do the majority of the work by myself, unless I'm doing something very large. So, or with materials that I don't use. And so I'm by myself all the time. So I'm really quiet a lot. This
Mhm.
could be a plea for help. I don't know.
I doubt that. That I
Hey.
don't worry about at all. Not at all.
Mm.
And so, oh, I think we can take off that header. We got, yeah. And so when we look and see how all of the work that you're going to be showing coming up, what types of pieces will you have for sale?
Well, you know, uh, Body and Soul initially
Hmm.
with Olitha, starting with Olitha Devane, was a venue for artists who maybe get a lot of money for their artwork, but it's a venue for artists to put all of that zeal, all that creativity, all of that love, because I am a Baltimore on Sandtown girl. That's it. And put all of that by using materials and our skill into artworks that are affordable. So all of those teachers who uh I actually, when I was younger, 73, so I don't see them now. They
Hmm.
would come to the shows and they would buy stuff because they could get it. And we still have really kind of valiant and people who are there for every show who come, and they get a couple of pair of earrings, you know, because we
Mhm.
usually do it at Christmas time,
Okay.
and this and that, and they use us as the, you know, their ethnic store maybe. So I'm going to be doing a lot of earrings and necklaces made out of materials and these that I've collected. These aren't found objects, I because there is a school of that, but these are
Mhm.
really curated pieces. I have beads from all over the world, and I'm putting them together in an easy way to wear. And you be looking good and everything. See, now I went to Baltimore. Forgive me.
Mhm. But girl, you know I know what you're talking about.
I know, but you know, the teachers are like that. Don't do that, Joy.
You're right. Would you
You
please
went to
stop?
school.
Time out. Right.
Why are you doing that?
I love you so much.
Yes, because I'm crazy.
Well, so birds of a feather. Birds of a feather.
And I
So
have
we
seen her feathers once. She had a plume, y'all.
hanging off your hand.
Exactly.
Okay, so Joyce, we've got a couple of more artists that are coming up.
Yay.
Yes, and I'm very excited. Our next guest is going to be, and he was here. Let me get his name, Mr. Anson Asaka, who is a civil rights attorney and a visual artist. In June 2004, Mr. Osaka began working for the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, and Mr. Osaka handles internal and various civil rights matters for the association. For several years, he's organized NAACP's Operation Bike Week Justice, an effort to ensure that all Myrtle Beach, South Carolina tourists are treated equally and fairly, regardless of race. In fact, he is featured in Black Beach, White Beach, a documentary about that work. For years, he supervised NAACP's Election Protection Command Center. On July 12th, 2009, Mr. Osaka received the NAACP Staff Lawyer of the Year Award, and he is the Assistant General Counsel, and he graduated cum laude from Howard University with a Bachelor's of Arts in Political Science in 1992. In 1996, he graduated from Rutgers Law School in New Jersey, and he's licensed to practice in the District of Columbia and Maryland and other states. And he is a visual artist. His last art exhibit was entitled Revolution on Canvas, an artistic protest against police brutality. The exhibit was held at the mansion at the National Great Blacks in Wax Museum from October 2021 to November 2021. And he's completed commission paintings for MFC headquarters in Philadelphia, Corpus Christi Catholic Church in Baltimore, and East Columbia Branch Howard County Public Library. Please let me introduce you to Anton Osaka. Hello, Mr. Osaka.
Hi, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. We appreciate having you coming and joining us. So, you're one of the artists that are going to be with us this coming weekend at Body and Soul. And you want to talk about your journey, not only as an attorney, but how did you become an artist? How did you make that transition?
Well, really, like all of my life, I've been into art. Like ever since I was a kid, I always liked to draw and paint. And one of my biggest inspirations was my uncle. Like he was a commercial artist, and he would regularly paint oil paintings, and that made me curious. And I wanted to, you know, paint myself. And then, one of the most precious gifts my mother got me was a paint set, oil paint set with all the paints and some paper canvas and all that kind of stuff. So that started my journey, and ever since I've been doing something artistically. But for a period of like over 10 years, I just stopped drawing and painting.
Why?
Um, I just got away from it. I just got away from drawing and painting for that period of time, for a very long time. And it was only after I took my daughter to the Baltimore Museum of Art, and we were actually working on a project, and one of the instructors saw me working, doing a drawing, and she said, your drawings are really good. You need to draw or paint every day. And that inspired me to get back into it. And so what I've been doing is using my art to express myself. I use it primarily to celebrate African American culture and the African American experience. So that's what I use my art for. My very first art exhibit was about 3 years ago. And for that exhibit, what I did is I drew a different historical figure for each day of Black History Month, and I would
Cool.
post it. And then one of my friends said, "You're doing all this art. Why don't you have an exhibit?" And that's something that I never even thought about. Like, I was just posting it online, and one of my friends, recommended that. And that's when I had my first exhibit. And from then on, like, I'm committed to having an exhibit at least, once a year or every other year.
That's very powerful. Too often we don't take the time to get into ourselves to really see what else is in there. We're so busy
Mhm.
being busy, it's kind of hard to find that avenue for creativity, or that avenue to try something that you've just kind of skimmed over
Mhm.
yourself, right? And I do that too often, thinking about, I really should be doing so and so, but you decided, okay, it's time. So in doing this, what you have a show, the part of the show here coming up um this weekend. And so what is it that you are going to be exhibiting?
So I'm going to be selling paintings. I have small paintings that are affordable that I plan to sell, and most of them are going to be celebrating African American women. And really, that's like a precursor to my upcoming exhibit that I plan to have next year during Women's History Month. And that exhibit is going to be dedicated to celebrating and honoring Black women in many different capacities, like all the different contributions that Black women make to society. Not only the role as mother or wife, but the role of scientist. We just saw that the nation has its first woman, African American woman, appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court. So I want to celebrate those kind of milestones with this next exhibit. That's what that's going to be about. Just celebrate. So the things that I will have are for sale at the upcoming show are images of Black women and some other pieces. So I have, and I'm actually creating those pieces now. Like, I'm going to create the pieces just for this upcoming body and soul sale. That's
Mhm.
so, and they're going to be historical figures. Like, one of the images that I have right here is one of Serena Williams. This
Oh,
item will be for
that's
sale right here.
beautiful.
And this image right here is a painting that I did for my Revolution on Canvas exhibit about police brutality. So, yeah, so that's just a little bit, so I'll have images like the Serena Williams for sale. I may add some drawings, like I do drawings that are on Black paper with chalk, like this
Mm,
portrait of
nice.
Sidney Poitier.
Yeah.
So I may have, some of those items for sale as well.
Okay. So in looking at the piece behind you, was this taken from an experience that you had?
Well, actually, this image is an image of young Black men protesting after the death of Freddie Gray here in Baltimore. So this
Mm,
is an image of a Baltimore protest that took place. And so usually what I do is I look at images, and usually an image will captivate me. So I started off with a concept of using art to protest against police brutality. And as I was exploring that concept, I looked over different images, and this is one of the images that captured my mind. I wanted to talk about the role of men in the protest against police brutality, because often men are victims of police brutality.
mhm.
So I use this image, just ripped from the headlines, and the title of it is "Don't Let Them Take Your Manhood," and that comes from a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King. And by standing up, these brothers were maintaining their manhood and their dignity as human beings. So that's what that image is about. And I
Mhm.
want to let people know before I forget that my exhibit is still available. It's actually available online. So I do a tour and I go through each piece of the exhibit and explain the inspiration and meaning behind each piece. And if people are interested in seeing that online exhibit, they can email me at ansonasaka@yahoo.com, and there's a $7 fee to see the exhibit. And what the thing about this exhibit that made it great is that on our reception day, I brought in activists that deal with these issues of police brutality, and I had them speak. And one of the important things about this event, my exhibit, is that a portion of the proceeds go to organizations that are actually doing the work. And one of the goals of having that exhibit was to inspire people to actually get involved in the movement against police brutality. So my art isn't art for art's sake. My art is with purpose. My art is designed to be an extension of my activism. As you pointed out before, I'm a civil rights attorney, and I see this art as another avenue to address the injustices in our society.
How do you balance that as an attorney? We have this idea that the attorney is, they wear this stuffed shirt and it's real stiff and, it's, very regimented, right?
Right.
And so behind you, I see pain. I see men who are tired. I see men who have said enough is enough, right? And so that whole piece of being someone who has the responsibility, right, to also defend those opinions, to defend what they see, and that what our institutions, our penal institutions, have done has made the people who are fighting against this pain the culprit, that they become the criminals. How do you balance that in a courtroom and with your art in looking at this? People are protesting, but then you got police trying to kill them. How does that, how do it's, I don't even know how you balance it, or I don't even think that's possible, but there has to be some place in between that brings that has to be able to bring it together for people to be able to talk about the reality and the truth, and for it to be received by, in Baltimore, a Black man who is the chief of police. That's a whole nother conversation. We're not going to go there, Marsha. Stop. So, but it has to be said. How do we affect that change?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a difficult balance because, even though I'm an attorney, I really see myself more as an activist. And a lot of times there's a tension between being an attorney and being an activist. So there is tension there. It is a challenge. But even, I use my art to bring attention to, issues of police brutality. But I also use the law to address those issues as well. There's several, cases of police brutality that I deal with as an attorney for a civil rights organization. And even the work in Myrtle Beach is about policing, about how the police were basically discriminating against African Americans, using everything that they could to try to discourage African Americans from coming to Myrtle Beach for Black Bike Week. So there's a lot of intersection between between my work as an artist and my work as an attorney. But there is a tension, and it is a challenge also, finding time to do the art. For my exhibit, basically I would work on each item, after work and on weekends and things like that. I wish I could just devote all of my time to being an artist. I wish I could divide myself and do multiple things at once, but it is a challenge. That's a great question.
Mm-hmm. And so, in looking at the NAACP in 2022, how has it changed to meet all of the fire that has been going on across this country? How are they still relevant today? Are there things that they're doing or not doing that we should be looking at? Or how do we as the community support that? What is it that they're doing that we don't know, and what is it that we need to be doing that we should know?
Right. So I'll start with what we need to be doing.
Okay.
Often people say, okay, this organization's not doing this or they're not doing that. the thing is, like, we need to ask ourselves, what are we doing as individuals to make a difference in our communities and in this country? So that's the first thing. And one of the things that we can do, as Kwame Ture often would advocate for, is be organized and join organizations. It's not enough for people to sit behind their keyboard typing or posting something on social media or even doing a video. People have to get engaged and involved in the struggle. So that's the first thing that I'll say, because nobody's coming to save us. We have to save ourselves. People are looking for a savior when they just need to look in the mirror and take action in their communities. So
Right.
that's the first thing. In terms of the NAACP, the NAACP is involved in every single major social justice issue in this country. They're on the ground in major cities, in cities throughout this nation, on the ground, in the streets, protesting along with other groups that you hear about, like Black Lives Matter. They're working with families around policing issues. We're doing all kinds of work, when it comes to environmental justice issues, voting rights, redistricting, every single major civil rights issue that's out there. The NAACP is still at the forefront of. We are still bringing cases in court. Anyone that goes to our website, the NAACP's website, naacp.org, they can see the work. And one thing that I would recommend people do is, if you use Google Alerts, you'll be able to see, like, every all around the country, all the work that the NAACP is doing. And one of the things that the president and CEO has done is that he is reaching out to young people, because young people are our future. And where the NAACP has been doing a lot of great work to engage and involve young people in the work. And that's another thing that people can do, like financially support organizations by being members, paying membership dues and things of that nature. It's not enough for people to just sit by and be critics. They need to get involved. And if they're not satisfied with organizations that are out here doing the work, then they need to create their own organization to do the work that they want to see done. So that's my response to that. And again, like, I want to be clear, I'm speaking as an individual, even though I work for the NAACP. I'm not, speaking on behalf of the organization.
I know it's not an official statement, so let me
Right.
say that we understand that it's not official, but the reality is that we need to know what the NAACP
Yes.
is doing. We're seeing a lot of madness going on, and we don't know what to do. And particularly through this whole business of COVID, everybody's on lockdown. People are very gentle about their movements,
Mhm.
and so we probably don't get as involved as we would normally be. We're not out in the street like we would normally be. But nevertheless, we have to be supportive. We have to affect change. We can't continue. I was talking to somebody on a show the other day, and 365 days, we have more than that for murders per day,
Mhm.
right? And so some of those are not always the police. So there's a bigger issue internally in a community, in our community, let me be specific. And how do we address that? How do we come to terms
Mhm.
with that? And what is it? And I know this is not the part of the NAACP's problem, but the reality is that while we're out here protesting and looking for help, we also need to be protesting and looking for help internally.
Mhm. Right. Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, even though, like, the issues of police brutality and the inner city violence are two separate issues, I think that it is a very important issue. Like you mentioned, like, over 300 people per year for like over 5 years have been murdered in this city.
Right.
And you've seen mayors come and go. You've seen these city council people come and go, but the problem remains. The problems of poverty, the problems of failing schools, and all of those problems contribute to the violence that we see. When young people don't have opportunities, when they don't have education, when they don't have jobs, they're going to engage in illegal activity. And that illegal activity breeds a lot of the violence that we have. Like if we had more jobs instead of guns and drugs influx in our communities, then we wouldn't see these types of problems that we see. And a lot of these problems deal with this systemic issues such as poverty, which is in fact a racial issue in Baltimore. Like there's a huge racial divide, unfortunately, in how people live. Just like here on the northeast section of Baltimore, you have York Road. On the west side of York Road, people are living, very well. Like you have mansions and, predominantly white enclaves. And then you go on the east side of York Road, you have, poorer communities, you have, some abandoned homes, you have open air drug markets and things of that nature. So those systemic issues have to be addressed. And unfortunately, our politicians just don't have the will right now or the capability to address them because these problems continue year after year as these politicians rotate in and out of government. But yeah,
that's a whole nother show.
Yeah.
I mean, like a real another show to talk about all of that, because right there starts a whole nother conversation.
Right.
But I appreciate what you have said. Are you saying something, Joyce?
May I say something? It's firstly, Anson, hello, and your work, and it's wonderful.
Thank you.
I think you made a real point that I'd like to tag in on, and that is that I believe African Americans with power and or money, whether you wish to live downtown or not, should come back home. And if you don't physically come back home, then you should invest in the communities where you left your parents. Many people went to the suburbs for all the reasons that we understand, and having a lawn is nice too. However, we forfeited our communities that are now being co-opted and rebought by young white people. And how can I be angry at them for having common sense to buy what many people left, because I stayed downtown.
Right.
We need to invest in our own communities and make them the communities that we want to be proud of and not complain about all the time. Because I'm in complete agreement with Anson. What would these young people do if they don't have role models? Schools that are really good schools, and hey, the teachers are killing themselves to make these better schools, but they're funded in a way that doesn't work for them. They're very oriented to testing, and that's really happening. So we need to come down and buy a block. We need to buy a block.
Well, so we're going to do a show on buying a block. I'm not kidding.
I believe
we should do a show on buying a block. That's a whole nother conversation. So in the meantime, we should not allow Larry Pancho Brown not to be part of this discussion. Pancho is a native of Baltimore. Ooh, dropping everything now. I'm all excited about the buying a block. He started his first business at the age of 17 as a sign writer, and he's been a full-time artist ever since. He received his Bachelor of Fine Arts degree in graphic design and photography from the Maryland Institute College of Art. His art, both fine and commercial, has been published nationally in Upscale, Ebony Man, Essence, and Jet magazines. His art is featured in the UCLA Fowler Museum of Cultural History book entitled Wrapped in Pride and Connecting People with Art. His popular works have been prominently featured on several TV shows, including A Different World, In the House, The Wire, The Carmichael Show, Star, and Greenleaf Movies, featuring his art including Avalon, He Said, She Said, and Soul Food. His work adorns the walls of the likes of Camille Cosby, Dick Gregory, Anita Baker, Susan Taylor, Ed Gordon, and Bernard Bronner, just to name a few. His original works are in the corporate and institutional collections of Coppin State University, the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History, the District of Columbia Superior Courts, the Children's Hospital of Richmond at Virginia Commonwealth University, Howard University Hospital, and Yale New Haven Health Park Avenue Medical Center. His earlier works were predominantly airbrush illustrations. He evolved from a graffiti artist in his earlier years to a classically trained sign painter and graphic artist. His early published works in the mid-'80s, like his Black on Black, Black is Black series, was the first to address the subject of colorism in the African American art realm. And he was one of many artists often referenced the popular artist who gained national recognition on The Cosby Show, which was a commercial success from 1985 to 2000 during a period known as the Golden Age of African American art. In pursuing his philanthropic goals, he founded Raising the Arts, which has created over 70 images to assist nonprofit organizations and African American organizations with fundraising for the past 2 decades. And he's co-founded Creative Quarantine, which is a collaboration with other professional artists. And he will be part of this upcoming show this weekend in Art Sale. I'd like to introduce my good friend, Larry Pancho Brown. Pancho, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. How you doing, Marsha? Hey,
I'm-
Joyce. Hey, Mr. Anderson. How y'all doing?
We are good. Wanted to hear about you and what you've been up to. And you went to Ghana
Yes, I did.
for what, 5-6 weeks, months?
6 weeks. 6 weeks.
Wow. What made you decide to go to Ghana?
Actually, I used to do trips to Africa. I had a group called Artists of Africa, and we went to Senegal and we went to Ghana. And one of the ladies who joined me on my Ghana trip actually moved from Los Angeles to Ghana, and left her. She retired from Xerox, got her a piece of property there. And when I went back, it was amazing to see how much work she's doing there now.
Wow.
And so she invited me and another artist, Karen Clark, to come on a bit of a residency to see if we can assist some of the artists in some of the cultural centers in Kumasi. And it went fantastic.
Well, when you say assist, what does that mean? What'd you do?
Well, I basically went to a studio of about 7 artists, and I just basically went in and shared my talents, shared my knowledge of selling art, distributing art, talked about culture, talked about content of their work, talked about the colors that they use, all kinds of stuff. Also invested some money into buying them new supplies, easels, display fence, and some work tables and stuff that they don't readily have enough money to buy. And so we also sold some of their works here in the U.S. and used that money I wanted to show them that they can empower themselves to keep their studios going, because right now it's it's kind of a dismal time for artists in the continent right now.
What are some of the issues that they're having to overcome?
The effects of Christianity.
Wait, what?
The effects of Christianity.
What does that mean?
They are abandoning their culture and traditions. They're beginning to look at their traditions and their culture as bad juju.
The traditions such as what and culture?
There are a lot of countries and a lot of people are afraid to even have African sculptures in their home.
Really?
Is
this by law?
I'm not making this up.
I know. I'm just still in
Your
shock.
question was, what does that mean? I don't want to get into a big religious discussion, because we went through a certain amount of that stuff here in the U.S. Okay? But it's different when you're in the continent, because it's like now they're not believing in the arts. They're not supporting the arts. I look at these creative children, I'm going, wow, what's going to happen next? It's an interesting time. And like Joyce said, it's time for us to start. If you ain't going to live in your neighborhood, invest some money in your neighborhood. Some of us need to go home. I'm talking about not just your neighborhood. You need to go back to the continent and see what's happening, because it's affecting all of us on every level. If you look at what's happened to us, this last trip proved to me that we are the blackest Black people on the planet. And when I say that, it's that we fought through so much and risen through so much that our identity, we are celebrating our Blackness. We're celebrating culture that most of us have never really truly been introduced to. And so we're at a magical time now where most of us need to visit home to make that connection. And I'm watching people move to different parts of Africa in droves after what's happening politically, since Orange Face to COVID to Black Lives Matter and all these other things that have happened. Folks are now beginning to make an exit strategy and go into different places in the world.
So, and to actually not as a second home, but as their main home is what you're saying.
Yes.
And so in those communities where they're moving, are they then they're artists, or are they working with corporations there, or how are they functioning?
Most of these people are retiring and they're making it their happy place.
Okay.
And they're taking their money with them. Mm-hmm. Money lasts a long time in Africa.
Did you say money lasts a long time?
Yes, I did.
Mm-hmm. So let's go back a little bit let's just talk about how you got to the place of being an artist, and what your specialties are, and what are the things that inspire you, that get you up out of bed and ready to paint.
What I'll say is that I'm a second generation artist. My dad had me when he was 16 and my mother was 16. So I grew up with my parents. But I watched my dad be a frustrated artisan because there was really no outlet for him during that period of time, and he had to take care of a family. And so I basically picked up the baton and was able to do some things that he was never able to do. And it's come full circle. You know, my son is even an artist now, and he's 32. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's never been something that I have to prepare to do. It's in all parts of my DNA. I was raised in Baltimore City. I went to school in Sandtown. That's right, Joyce. I went to Carver, and that's changed my life because I learned a trade. You know, I learned how to do signs. My beginning career was painting signs. That paved my way through the Maryland Institute College of Art. You know, but I graduated from there and I started my own business. So Baltimore roots is at the base of my story. There's a whole lot of advocacy. There's a whole lot of other things that happen to if you can survive in Baltimore, you are primed for the rest of the world. That's for sure.
How so? How so?
Because Baltimore is a tough town, you know, but it's not a pretentious town. You know, if people like you, they like you. If they don't like you, they don't like you. And there's no in between. You can have total anonymity in Baltimore City because people won't care what you're doing, really.
Right. They don't. Just leave her alone. You know how she is.
As long as you ain't in trouble, leave them alone.
Go ahead. You know? Right.
So there's a lot of room for me to be me and not have to go through a lot of stuff. But Baltimore's also a tough town. So you have to learn how to, survive and stay away from the hustle and the grind. I was raised in the same neighborhoods that these movies are made out of. So I know what it's like to have that element, to live in impoverished neighborhoods and see this stuff not change for 20 years, and some of the stuff that Mr. Asaka and Joyce were talking about. I was brought up in that, you know. So I see what happens when you leave a community barren for so long, and where most of this activities happen. I tell you, you want to see Baltimore change, let the gun violence start affecting Black-owned white crime, and you will see them reform this whole city.
and that's a whole nother show. That's like a weekend.
No, I do. I know it. Yeah, you're right. But I'm just making
no. I'm not saying it's wrong. Hang on to it, because it really is. When we started that conversation, and now we're bringing it full circle, because the reality is that we have to deal with our truth. We don't, what is that? Who is that says you can't handle the truth? Right.
That was from an old movie.
That was from an old movie. I don't remember who it was. Somebody said you can't handle the truth. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah, that is Tom Cruise. It was a military
exactly
thing, and I can't
see
it.
But it's real, right?
Because
you can't. We don't always want to deal with the reality of everything.
Yeah, and the problems are our problems are not just on one level. They're multifaceted problems that you can't solve with one thing or the other. You know, nobody wants to talk about mental illness and how that's rampantly affecting the decisions that we make every day. You know, we're not talking about all the other things that contribute to this, other than the disenfranchised, guns in our communities, and all these other things. But you know, we could spend a whole show on that. What I will say is that the great thing about what Joyce and Leslie King Hammond started by doing this Body and Soul is it does give us a chance to come into our community. We have always supported our communities with our work, whether they were ready for us or not. And we come in with things that are affordable, because a lot of times you get to a certain level, folks feel like they can't afford you anymore. And I'm like, well, no, that's not true. When I come to that show, I bring my catalogs, I bring books, I bring my some of my products, and people are surprised that they are affordable. I'm like, I don't know why. That's what we do, you know. And so, yes,
I must say that this was started by Olitha Devane, who is an artist, and Leslie and I became later on. And the other thing about affordable art,
I think we lost her feed.
that's my phone.
Oh, okay.
I tire of people talking about the prices of African American art when they'll pay $200 for a pair of tennis.
Exactly.
Can't hear you, Joyce.
And that to be really difficult to hear when we can support each other. We just can support each other and give things to people that are really beautiful. It's not as if we're asking you to buy crap. We're really saying, here's some really good product for you to have. I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure that Olitha got her props in this.
No, I appreciate that.
But we appreciate that. We need to have that information. And so Pancho, in looking at where we are, and how do we get and make sure, I know schools are changing a lot, right? And how they're doing it. And so we don't have the classrooms like we had before. How do we make certain that our young people are getting what they need in order to be part of learn to become an artist, that have that unction? What do we do with them? How do we deal with them?
Well, you know, I've dedicated a lot of my life to mentorship, but the reality is our schools are not prepared for it. They abandon the arts. And then now, even though they see art initiatives as a gateway to being able to capture the interest of our children, they've done too much to break it down. I mean, I remember when in the early 90s, when they started taking art out of schools with music and dance and with the agenda to replace it with computer labs and so forth. They never did look at those things as an important contribution to our development together. They just abandon one and replace it with the other. And so until you really do more in the school level, we're going to have some serious problems. We're developing a whole generation of kids now that are culturally barren. They have no real connection to what the arts are. They're all on phones and on video games. And so I see a lot of really nice art initiatives targeting children. But if you don't give them something in middle school, high school, then how do you send them to a Maryland Institute College of Art?
Right.
When I went to school, I was one of a few Black people, and Joyce can attest to that. But most of the students that dropped out was because they weren't prepared.
You mean from a skill standpoint, or
just a developmental standpoint? I wasn't college ready when I went to Micah myself. But when you go and you don't have support programs in the arts until you get to college, that's not going to work.
Right.
You got to have some stuff. I mean, when I've done tons of things in Baltimore City, doing art competitions for students. I did that for a decade in Baltimore. And when I decided to leave it, I was like, I wonder if anybody's going to, I've serviced over 1,000 children with this program. I wonder, is anybody going to try to keep this thing going? No, they didn't. So it's more than one notion, but where do you put your child if they're on the floor drawing right now? We got to start back to basics. If your child is showing some artistic talent, go to the store, and instead of buying that $200 video cartridge, buy them some paper, some pens, some watercolor sets, or whatever you can find. We have to start nurturing it at home, because this is a DNA-based thing. You don't need to really have classes to do this. If a person's interested in it, You just give them what they need to do it and try to support them the best way that you can.
Mhm.
And so I get people in droves all the time. Hey, do you teach classes? Hey, where can I send my child? I'm like, you know what you can do? Go to Blick, go to Maryland Institute store, go to Arts and Craftsman store, and know how and give yourself a budget and take them to the store with you and let them just pick out some stuff.
Mhm. You know, I think one thing that's very interesting, though, that I find fascinating is, you know, when I was, okay, again, now that was 100 years ago. When I was in school, we had art was just as a mainstay. That was one of the classes that you just had to take. So if we're looking at in an environment where the pandemic, we can't get on the internet, we can't even get a piece of chalk and a crayon. How do we as a community do a change or help the school system, the Baltimore City school system, fix this? How do we get them to fix this? What is it that we need to do to say? I mean, we keep saying it. What is it that we need to do to get this to change? We should have a holistic approach to the education of our children. Arts and science and math and all reading and music, it's all together. It's all
We,
part of it. Reading, writing, arithmetic, and drawing. I mean, you just did all that. The arts were part of it.
I understand. I'm a baby boomer, so I get everything you're saying. But the
Okay.
reality is, we have moved more than 1 or 2 steps away from finding a solution. You know what happens? Sometimes you wait so long to take action that it's not just one thing that has to happen. And so in our communities now, there are all kinds of programs for children to do different things. But there's nobody shouting them, there's nobody networking them, nobody knows who these organizations are. And unless you're really steadfast and live on Google, some of these programs will pass you by. We have art initiative areas in Baltimore City, and I'll put that in air quotes because
Okay.
they don't service our children. They
Okay.
service a cross section of people. Our children are dying in the middle of this. We got Micah, we got the Walters, we got the BMA, we got the Reginald Lewis, we got the UB Blake, we got the Frederick Douglass Myers Museum. We got all these places that
Institutions
yeah,
that should be.
and most of them are, but they can never do enough because the problem is so big.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
if I lined up all the children I've worked with since I've been in Baltimore City, I know I could fill up at least one level of the stadium. But I don't know if everybody else is doing that. I think other people are. We're never able to know who we're touching by what we do. You know, so yeah, I would like to see him give you a formula of what it would take, but making venues available is one. You know,
Funding venues is another one.
well, funding is always an issue.
Yeah.
But people pay for what they want to pay for. The biggest problem I see is they don't offer many venues are becoming harder and harder to find where people are actually doing something for the kids to come in and do projects.
Mhm.
They come in with an agenda of what they want to achieve, but it normally doesn't target the kind of stimulation you would like to see. Because some of the stuff is real. It's not complicated. We don't need. We just need children to be in a therapeutic space to create. Just put them in a room with some light music on and some light instruction, and just let them just do what they do. And if you ask yourself how many programs around Baltimore City, not that I'm cracking on Baltimore, because that same problem is being in other parts of
Other
the country.
cities. Mhm.
You
But
know,
how does the art community, right? How does the art community pull together and maybe it becomes this art summit to have this conversation in a community-based environment where we now can have real hardcore discussions and maybe even almost in a retreat environment with the school system and our legislators to talk about the importance of art and that expression.
I think that there's a lot of that happening, and my problem is that there's too much talking going on.
But
Lots of talk,
how do
lots
you
of talk
deploy
and
it?
conjecture, but no actual action.
Mhm.
You know what's happening is we've come up with this philosophy of what it takes to get our children into this creative thing, but we're not looking at the basics of what it takes.
And what are those basics?
Space to work, staff to oversee them, and supplies to work with. Yes, funding is at the core of it, but I've seen a lot of magical programs happen where funding wasn't at the top of the list. That's a big excuse. You know, we got more arts agencies in Baltimore. They all have their areas that they're interested in. And a lot of times our kids in our communities is not priority for them. We got African-American artists in this city that still can't get the kind of support that other artists are getting in the city.
What do you mean support? What do you mean?
We have BOPA, we have a bunch of other arts agencies in this town. These are art initiative-oriented organizations that are trying to make our children the beneficiary of this information, but somehow it's not trickling down to them.
Okay. So if it's not trickling down, what should we be doing?
We should be creating more spaces for our children to work.
So if we're saying then we want to look at some of the, what is it? The Walters or Great Blacks in Wax, or
each one of these agencies have a space where children can come and draw and paint regularly if they wanted to instill these programs. So the space thing is the first thing, and then finding people that are willing to oversee these art is the next step. There's a lot of students in art education here in Baltimore City. They have no place to go.
But okay, there's a lot of students in this city with art for art education, but they have no place to go. Where can they go? Do they even know where to go?
They don't know where to go because as soon as they go to Baltimore City schools, they're going to be deterred from going in, either through salary or through lack of interest. I mean, these people coming out eager to, plant roots with our children, and so there's a lot of places and that we're having these disconnections, and kids are still left in the wayside. And so when we start looking at what can we do, we got to come up with a multi-pronged attack on what to do. It's not just one thing. And we got to stop talking about some stuff and start getting some stuff done. I mentor a lot of children, and I'm going to continue to do that. People don't know anything about my artist advocacy, but they don't know the artist advocacy of the average artist anyway. So when you start saying artists need to, or agencies need to, or we need to, the community needs to start making it easier for our children to have a space to work. For me, that's it. I mean, if you're at home and your parents don't even set a space aside, they can set a space aside for a Zoom station now, but they can't set a space aside for you to draw, paint, and do whatever. We have to bring it back home first before we can start talking about fixing it in the community.
But in not only fixing it in the community, what is it that we should be in the community, quote unquote? What should we be doing with our school system? So if we can't deal with it in the community itself, how do we get it from wherever we are to the school system, so that the school system,
the school system does not replace art, music, and dance, because it's as simple as rekindling that flame, restarting it with an intent. We've seen how far technology has gotten us. Let's go back now and reincorporate some things that we know affected these children's grades. And every test known to man has been done on the importance of art and music to our children, both developmentally challenged children as well as our babies at home. It's been proven time and time again. Lots of money is circulating through Baltimore for art initiatives, but very few initiatives actually affect our children. They affect artists that are disenfranchised, because we got a lot of artists in this city that don't get a chance to do anything. They can hardly participate in the grant systems or other things. So we got multiple problems laid on top of each other. And I really don't think that's going to change anytime soon until our churches and our schools reincorporate art.
So that should almost be something that we go to with all of our legislators or something that we can send to them to make certain that this is what needs to happen, that's a priority. How do we make it a priority with our legislators and our community and voters?
Yeah, but he's also saying, which is what I'm agreeing with, if I'm understanding you, Pancho, that a lot of this is grassroots stuff where you go to the church and you say, I'd like to have an arts program, after Sunday school. Let's have a artwork where they draw pictures of everything they just verse 8 to 9 or whatever. When you have an Easter program, then let's make the Easter things instead of you're going to the dollar store and buying them. And so they become inculcated. They become part of the curriculum that the church uses. But that's kind of difficult
it's
for
very
many
difficult.
folks to see it, because they don't necessarily see that as a godly pursuit. And it's just one more thing to do at church. I mean,
Exactly.
but I think that is one of the things that you're saying. And I know I was raised in Pentecostal church, and boy, was I there a lot. And we certainly did do art there too.
Yeah,
lot of it.
but I never had to worry about a place to go. I've always had art classes when I was coming through school. And so it's really disheartening for me to see us at this stage now. I mean, I was a byproduct of the commercial art department at Carver Vocational Technical High School, which is now closed.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, where are the children going to get a chance to partake in this when they get to college? What's going to happen between middle school, high school, and college? It's like it's so screwed up now that something major has to happen. But until the parents at home start nurturing these kids, because believe me, as we speak, artists are still all over the place. They just don't have as much guidance as they used to have.
But isn't it also about the administration?
It's always about the administration. But you know what? I'm not going to spend a lot of time. This is just Pancho. Okay. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about what the legislators need to do. If that's what people think they want to do, go ahead. I have heard that talk forever, and I'm living in this story. And I've done more just by the things we're talking about, creating spaces where children can work, talking when my parents come to me, hey, what can my child do? Hey, let them come by here on Saturday, drop them off. Hey, oh, by the way, this is a list of what supplies to get your kid at home. That's grassroots. That's what we need to start doing. Because until then, the legislators are never going to get it together. They got their own problems, and we're already underfunded in Baltimore and every other major city in the United States. It's not going to change overnight. But the attitude towards the arts can change. Now, we're still holding on to the glory of art. There's still a lot of art initiatives going on that shows you that people are interested in protecting the arts. But protecting the arts for our babies is another whole sentence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, I think I'm glad that we're actually having this conversation, because one of the problems that we have is also having the infrastructure in our homes and the infrastructure in our schools, and with teachers who are committed, but they don't have the assistance. So we have all these unions, we have all these other organizations that are supposed to be helpful, but at some point, somebody needs to be able to say, I give. This is what we need to be able to do.
This is no different to me than when they took physical ed out of school. Mm-hmm. But yet we notice a big obesity problem in our children. Mm-hmm. And then so we went to go correct the diets of our children, and we went through legislation to have some of that changed. But we never put the physical education back in the school.
Back in the school.
How does that work?
Right.
We keep looking at this let's fix government, let's fix. Hasn't been the answer. I haven't seen anything that's been a byproduct of that.
Right.
Because the problem is running so much more rampant than we think.
Right.
We're all professional artists, so we can afford we figured out how to make ourselves sustainable through this. Mm-hmm. But when you start talking about the artists that are coming behind us, we have to do a lot to kind of pull them through this whole thing. This is part of our tradition in the United States too.
To be able to deal with it, right?
Exactly. So that's what I do. I don't spend the time looking at what things are never going to really come together in this lifetime. I don't think it's going to happen in my lifetime. But I think we can get to a back to basics approach on what we do in our homes with our children and the programs that we are. Everybody can do a program. It's just finding a space. If I got a space where I can house kids for a couple of days and they can have at least one meal, I'd be happy. But trying to get people on that bandwagon might be difficult because so many other things are happening in the city.
All right. This has been a very interesting conversation. And I'm going to
let's buy a block. I'm all in.
Let's buy a block. Then we can do what we want to do. There's a Reverend Hathaway is doing something. We're going to talk offline about that with him. And I think that this might be a continuation of a conversation. I know you have. I'm talking. Yes.
Me and Alvin have a lot of discussions on this same subject.
Well, there's some things going on. So let's say this is part one. We're going to do this again. And I'm just going to say this real quick that we can see Anson Asaka, Larry Pancho Brown, and Joyce J. Scott this weekend. And it's Saturday. Is it this weekend? Saturday, April 23rd.
Yes, thank you.
Yes. I don't know if it's this week or next week.
You saw me slowly look over at my calendar like, is it this week?
Is it this week? No. Because today's what? I don't know. Anyway, Saturday, April 23rd at noon, from noon to 5 at the Motor House at 120 West North Avenue. And would like to invite you all to go and watch and buy all of this wonderful art. And our 3 artists are going to be there as well.
I do all my shopping at these things. So Joyce will tell you, I make my rounds with every artist and buy me a thing or two from everybody. So come on down and have fun with us. Huh?
I make money with ponchos.
Y'all funny. All right. Thank you all so much for coming. We're going to have to do this again.
Anytime.
Take care.
All right. Thank you all.
Bye, Joyce.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Anson.
Bye, Mr. Asada.
Take care. I'd like to introduce our next, we're moving so fast here, I'm just behind. I'd like to be able to introduce you to Samara and Aaron Maven, and I'm so excited that you're here. Thank you all for your patience and trying to get the link to them. And so we're going to go ahead and move forward because I got the wrong thing in front of me, so I can't. Let's just talk about your, there you go. We need to get you a little closer together.
Scoots.
Hi.
Hey.
I haven't seen y'all in a long time.
I know. It's been a minute.
Been too long.
It's been way too long. So we didn't get to put your name up there. Aaron Maven and Samara Jones, then both authors. And we also know that Aaron is an artist.
Well, you just had my mentor on your show. So yeah.
Joyce?
Yeah, absolutely. Nah,
Larry? Pancho.
Yeah.
Yes. They're going to be in a show this next weekend. You need to be in there next year.
Absolutely.
And it's annual, right? But let's talk about what you all have been doing. And we've got all these books that are out. Let's talk about those books that have been happening. We've got journals, and I don't know, I think you probably have a whole collection of books now, Aaron.
Yeah.
Can we talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm on title number 6 at this point. So
title number 6. And so let's start here. Where do we purchase your books?
My books are available pretty much wherever books are sold. If you go on my website, aaronmaven.com, they're available there. They're also available through Lulu, through Amazon, through Barnes and Nobles, through locally. They're available at Urban Reads Bookstore. They're available at Red Emma's. They're available at Charm City Books. So yeah, pretty much wherever books are sold, you can buy my titles.
And so, Samara, you have now started this journey in the
Yes.
journalism.
Yes.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that.
Toast.
Yes.
I just said I'm on title number 6, but this is
Right.
number 1 for her. So this is the real drop.
Yeah, this is the book. It's beautiful.
Put it back up. Wait a minute. Hold it. Slow, a little slow.
Yeah, you got that blur
Up a little bit.
on there, so you got it.
There you go. Wait. We stand.
So the title is "We Stand on the Shoulders of Those Who Came Before Us."
Okay. And what's it about?
So it's an activity book for families to kind of get to know your history a little bit better, get advice from the elders and have a place to keep it documented for future generations. That's that's like the gist of it.
She's selling it very short. All right. So
I know. I'm just like, okay.
This
I'm gonna light this fire underneath you, girl.
Go ahead on and
please
take my author hat off and put on my marketing bag real quick.
Thank you.
So this project for Sam is it's been a labor of love, but I think I wouldn't be completely all right. So when y'all hear these random voices, you need to know that I'm holding, young Ava. So she wants to make sure that she's heard in this conversation.
And
but
we love it. We love it. We love it.
I think that one thing that has always been, consistent in all of our conversations, even outside of just our relationship with one another, is just our desire to see Black people and Black communities and Black families specifically rise, and oftentimes we'll have a lot of conversations about what that looks like. What does us bringing family back together and actually being able to hand down these stories and these remnants look like. And one of the things that she would often bring up was the fact that
that's okay. Just keep it moving. Girl. She's gonna do what she's gonna do.
She would bring up the fact that we don't have family albums anymore. You know what I mean? Like in this age of social media and of everything being so accessible digitally, very rarely do we ever actually flip through photo albums and actually be able to look through the remnants of our family's history. Very rarely do we actually know the lineage that we descended from. And in this day and age, when so many people are losing valuable family members, their patriarchs, their matriarchs of their family, a lot of the stories and a lot of the history of our culture gets lost without the ability or the opportunity for it to be passed down. And what she's done such a beautiful job of, I think, is creating a project that allows for families and for people to pick and choose the stories that they want to preserve and pick the family members that they want to do that storytelling. It allows us to be the griots of our own family history and traditions and start to say, well, what are the foods that we traditionally have always eaten and are beneficial to us as a family? What are our spiritual values? What are our viewpoints on relationships? What are some experiences that we've had that we want to talk about with the future generations? How do we want to point them in a pathway forward towards sustainability? I think that that's something that's a synergy between our STU projects, the idea of contributing towards sustainability. What does that look like? How do we bring families together? And what are the ways that we go about preserving our narrative for future generations?
That's really powerful. And I'm sorry, what?
I mean, you wasn't doing it. I wasn't going to let you just get off. And then you just was like, nah, you got to tell them what it is.
I love y'all. Y'all so cute. So would you care to say something, Samara?
I think he said it all.
No, he didn't.
That was my intention when I created the book. And it came at a time, we were in a pandemic and so many people were losing family members. And I'm like, okay, we in a weird space where we're moving more so into the technological era. And then our elders are passing away and we don't really know how to do things with our hands anymore. Like we can't sustain ourselves pretty much if we're not asking the right questions. So that led me to create this book right here, which pretty much gives you the space, like he said, to ask those questions and to document pretty much what their life was like, how they did things, and how we can carry the torch forward once they, move on. So,
and I think that that's really important when you start to think about the importance of the real family dynamic, right? You got to ask your family some essential questions like, who are we? Where do we come from? Who do we come from? How do we find a way not just to preserve the narrative of where we come from and who we descended from,
right,
but what should be said about our family? When our name is spoken, what should people know about us? You know what I mean? What should be left of us after we are gone? What are our family heirlooms? You know what I mean? Who has them? Who possesses the stories and the fabric that binds us going forward for future generations? How do our kids know their identity and from the ancestors that they descended, the food that we ate, the gods that we worship, the way that we went about communing with one another, the way that we went about loving on one another in our personal relationships, the way that we raise children? All of those things are important and they're essential and they're different in so many households. But what she does is not just talk about her family experiences and say, this is my experience, but she says, what are your family experiences? Who are these people for you? Who should they be for your children? If you were to leave one message for them, what would it be? What would it be concerning love? What would it be concerning economics? That's something that we don't talk about. What are the mistakes we made? How did we fumble the bag in the past? How did we see these movements forward but not through to completion? And where do our future generations pick up the ball and run with it where our race was finished? And I think that that's just something that's so essential and people aren't discussing it and it's not shown. And I think that if many more families had that, just the conversation that it creates, it's worth it.
It's really interesting. I lost my sister a couple of weeks ago, and one of my sisters. And when you sit down and you talk about that, there are a lot of questions that she had moved to Atlanta. I can't really see you, Aaron, so you want to scooch the two of you together. What I found was really odd. I didn't really know a lot about her, right? And this book should have been in her possession so that we would know a little bit about her, right? What she had moved down there, and unless you go to visit Atlanta for any period of time, you're not really getting the full effect of what that person's about. In person versus over the phone, when the phone's ringing or you got something, the man's at the door, all of that just takes away from even concentrating on being able to ask all of those questions that are in your book. And that somebody has actually taken the time to sit down and think about the people. And I'm using myself as an example, where as a individual who wasn't raised with her birth mother, right? Had she written all that down before, I would at least know something about her. Right. And I know absolutely nothing about her. I have one or two little things that you can hold on to, but there's no in-depth informational guide on what was important to her, where she lived, or what she liked, what food, what music. I have no idea. I have no idea. And, we sit back and we don't really think about that as we're moving through life until that life is no longer there. And then
not to interrupt you, but I think that it's important that we also remember that, like, even once that life is no longer here with us, we still carry all of the things that hopefully are left behind. But one of the things that we don't really focus on or get a chance to focus on is what's left behind, because usually we have to focus on what we don't have.
Yes.
We don't have money to bury a person.
We
don't have money to have a funeral. People have to have GoFundMe's just to put their loved ones in the ground. We can't even talk about legacy and generational wealth then. But when you have a book where Sam has given you questions to pull from, to literally say, all right, these are the questions that I want to cherry pick and have certain relatives answer this question. Like when you ask them, how were disagreements handled in our household?
Ooh.
That's a real, when you talk about generational trauma, that's an unpacking that we all need to be able to do. There's a lot of us that don't know how to handle situations where disagreements happen because we grew up in dysfunctional situations. But just by asking the question now, you give your relatives, the pure people that raised you, an opportunity to unpack and to let you know some things that maybe they contributed to that they regret, and allow them to point us in a better direction. You know, when you ask what legacy means for us, right? You know what I mean? Like what's a way that your heart was broken? You know, like what's a regret that you have in business, or what's a regret that you have in your personal relationships that you've built with one another? You know, these are things that hopefully as you get older, you want to share with your family members. You know, as we all get older, we get more introspective and we start to think of, you know, the decisions that we've made in our lives, and we start to think of those that we're leaving behind. And now she's given a project where those stories don't have to be lost, you know, to the years. We have an opportunity now. And the thing about it is, like, because it's like the questions are right here in front of you, they're right in the book, so they're plain. So all you really have to do now is sit down at the feet of your elders and have a conversation. You know what I mean?
And so in essence, you take this book, you go to the family reunion, and you let everybody can sit around and play with this and wordsmith all of the pieces. And
she's left pages where you can put photos, and you know what I mean? I'm thinking about the folks that go and get a couple hundred photos printed up, and they're going to cut them out and paste them all in there, because this is a real family heirloom. This is something that you're going to hand down to your kids and their kids and the kids after that. And by the time you hand it out, it's going to have paper clips and a whole bunch of extra paper and notebook paper and all that kind of stuff in there, because it's impossible, even in one project like this, to squeeze all of the stories of our history.
Right.
But it's an attempt, and it's the beginning to a much larger discussion. Hold on, let me see.
You know, I think the thing that's really fascinating.
It's a beginning to a much larger discussion.
This is something that should be at everybody's family reunion, or at the holiday, Thanksgiving, Christmas. So Samara, do you envision this being something that everybody in the family has, or is there a person who becomes the gatekeeper of the information? The griot? Did you say the griot?
The griot.
Right.
So, of course, I would like everybody to be able to get their hands on it, but that I don't know. I guess it depends upon like the person. For me, my intention was for the people who are invested in preserving their family history and the stories. This is for them. This is for those who are going to be responsible enough to go seek the answers, you know, journal the answers, keep them, and then pass them down to the next one who's going to be responsible. But of course, everybody would still, I guess, need to get a piece of the story somehow. So yeah, hopefully it can be in as many hands as possible. It's definitely something that you're going to have to buy more than one book of. I mean,
really? Why is that?
I mean, if you have a big family,
but all right, because not even if you have a big family,
we just sat down.
We have a daughter with the energy of 10 lions. I have to corral her and be able to speak intelligently with you at the same time without her having to do this. Exactly.
And she loves doing it, and I love listening to her. So whatever.
Exactly. So basically, everybody in the family is going to want a copy of this book because, like, for example, I'm buying one for each member of my family because mine is mine. It's mine.
Why didn't I already know? You know, I already knew that, though, right?
It's mine for me to compile all of the different people that I want answering all of these questions. I get to pick the questions that I want answered. I get to pick the people who I want to be my storytellers and my preservers of history. That might be different for my sister or for my brother. And I have children. My sister now has a daughter of her own. Hopefully my other sister and my brother will have children of.
Wait a minute, I can't hear you.
They need to be able to hand this heirloom down to their children. You know what I mean? And that is not a selfish thing on my regard. That's a preserving of history thing. All of my children are now going to have to divide this information up equally amongst them, as they should. That's my family unit. As we're talking about as we're starting to gear towards the way that my book is centered now, that's what our code consists of.
What's Getting on Code?
Getting on Code. Yes, that's my newest title.
Okay, so what is it?
It wasn't intentional, but these two titles kind of coincide in a way, in many ways, because what my book is about is essentially what should be our code that we use to determine how we operate with one another as Black people.
The code of here's how we live, or the code of how we are portrayed, the code of
no. The code of how we live, how we deal with each other, how we center what's best for us as a people above what's best for me as an individual, the way that we organize, the way that we actually
in our family or community.
Both.
Okay.
We talk about the family. We talk about the community. We talk about our schools. We talk about the importance of how we deal with each other as Black men and then as Black women. We talk about our relationship with each other from a spousal dynamic, but also from a family dynamic. It's about this whole idea of a lot of us have spent years reading books and having conversations about all of the problems in our community. Not that it's a waste of time, but we know all of these problems. We've known them for generations, and most of them haven't changed. They just evolved. Very rarely are we spending all of our time having these conversations, not about what the problems are, but about what the solutions are that we can agree upon as a collective. We spend so much time focusing on the things that we disagree on, but we act like there aren't so many more paths of intersection between what we can agree on and what we don't. And my goal is to get us to the point where we're focused on having an asset-based conversation rather than a deficit-based conversation.
What does that mean? I don't know what that means. An asset-based
conversation. A deficit-based conversation means because the school system has been what it's been for so long and everything in it is broken, we should just accept the fact that it's broken and it's beyond repair. It's beyond saving. An asset-based approach is, yes, it's terrible, but we have kids that are in there right now that need help.
Right.
Either we're going to keep on spending time complaining about it's being terrible, or we're going to actually roll up our own sleeve and get our hands dirty and coming up with a solution. Asset-based.
Well, you've been getting your hands dirty for a while.
Absolutely.
You've been bringing clothes into schools. I mean, tons of clothes and tons of food, coats, boots, and everything else. And it has to keep being done.
Absolutely. One of the reasons why we've opened up the rec center.
Let's talk about that.
I mean, look. I don't know how much time we have a conversation for, but long story
short, we got
a
whole half an hour left.
Long story short, all of the things that you've heard of me doing for these years to help in the school system made me a target. I was removed. And rather than spend a whole bunch of time having a deficit-based conversation about how I was so wronged and they did wrong by me and I want my job back, this, that, and the third, I decided to get with my brother, Torrey Smith, and his wife, Chanel. And instead of finding another school within the same system that proved that it didn't want me, opened up a rec center outside of the control of the school system, where we're going to do all of the same things that I've been doing and Chanel has been doing within the school system for years, under our own banner, in a space that we control, we operate, and that we have say in the future and the destiny of.
Hmm. Now, what is this called? And is this a nonprofit? And how do people find out more about it?
We're located right on Phelps Lane, in West Baltimore, right behind Green Street Academy. It's called the Hilton Rec Center. We opened it up in partnership with Baltimore City Rec and Parks. The other partner is Tory's foundation, Level 82, and through that partnership, we've been able to not just secure, update, and reopen a building that used to be a rec center but was closed for over 13 years in that same community. But we've been able to secure partnerships with the Baltimore Ravens and Under Armour to finance our expansion of the building and the grounds around it. So within the next 3 to 5 years, our campus will actually be comparable to the size of a school.
I love it. And so in this recreation center, what are you doing over there? What are the kids experiencing?
Everything, obviously with my background as an educator, with Chanel's background as an educator, and with Tori's passion, not just for education, but for athletics and philanthropy. It's been a partnership that's been so beautiful and fruitful to watch develop, because it comes from the most genuine place that one can have, which is a desire to see our city rise.
Right.
So within that center, we have right now we're in the middle of spring break, so we've got all of our kids in camp for spring break. We earlier today we took them out to Washington, D.C. to visit the Black History Museum out there. That was a whole day experience. We started all the way down in the basement with the beginning of our people's history of in this country, and we matriculated our way through that building all the way to the top to see the journey that our people have gone through, and that was just today's experience. Yesterday, they were just being kids having fun and playing laser tag and all that kind of stuff around the space. But the campus that we have right now, as I stated before, it was closed for over 13 years as a rec center that was open years back in that same neighborhood. Obviously, it needed a great deal of work to the facility just to get it up to code for us to be able to do what we do right now. And obviously, that was in the middle of a global pandemic.
Right.
So unlike many places that had to close up during that time, we were servicing our community, and we were a resource for our kids and our people, during the time where, they probably needed it the most. We were actually able to open during the pandemic, which was a feat in and of itself. But just being in there, we have, even though we're in the early stages, we have our state-of-the-art computer lab. We have a community library that we've worked very hard to build and develop with revolutionary books that our kids in our community don't have access to within the school system. We have curriculum, as I spoke of before, that I developed for the school system, which is still being taught in about 25 schools in the city, that now we're teaching to our kids and our parents in the community center at the rec. We have our after school program, where our kids in the community and from other communities neighboring come to our facility to get help with homework, to get tutoring 3 days a week in math and sciences, and to have access to our digital resources like our computer lab, and some of the other technological access resources that we have for them in the facility. So, when you ask what we're doing as much as we can with the resources that we have, and with the partnerships that we're beginning to be able to secure. It's expanding on the bandwidth that we have to do a great deal more, not just in that community, but opening it up to communities like it across the city.
So this is just, you've planted a seed here, right? And it sounds like this is going to germinate throughout some other communities across the city. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I never tried to act like, I'm by myself in this front. My partner, to my right now is been lockstep and key with me in just about everything that I've done along this front, and it has to be. the family has to be on code before anything else can function. There's no way that that we can do the work that we do outside of this household unless the first priorities in this household are taken care of, which is the little girl running around right around us, and her siblings upstairs that she's trying to get to right now.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, that has to be the first priority and our first ministry. And I think the pandemic has actually given us both an opportunity to really recenter that and refocus that. Well, I'll say me, because I won't put my struggles on Sam. For me specifically, my kids have always had to share me with the world, essentially, whether it was as an athlete or as a community figure like I am now. But one of the things that Sam was really adamant about, especially during this time of quarantine and pandemic and all that, was, you give so much to everybody else, but, your first priority and your first ministry should be, your children and your household.
Right.
They shouldn't feel like, they get what's left over after you're done working on behalf of everybody else in the community.
Oh, that's powerful. Say that one more time. I just need to hear it. Just one more. It just needs to just one more.
The fact is, no man's family and children and all of that should, have to get what's left over after you're done, sowing into your family, into your community, and into your work and all of that. That comes second. So during that time, it's really allowed for me to do a bit of reorganizing and, my priorities and my scheduling and all of that kind of stuff. And, the result of that is actually brought me and my children and, the whole family, a lot closer together, because of the fact that, that was always supposed to be, the pecking order, and sometimes we allow ourselves to forget that. But, if you're smart, you surround yourself with people that always hold you accountable to the person that you aspire to be, not the person that you are at present moment,
But I think what's beautiful about you all is that, the love is apparent, and it's just easy breezy over there, right? I haven't seen you all.
Ask my partner if it's all ever easy, but I feel like
it's easy breezy. Let me, if I'm looking from the outside in, it looks easy breezy. We already
it always
know
is from the outside in. The outside in only sees the
I can't
highlight.
stand you. Let me say what I say. Ain't nobody ask you to try to change what I'm saying.
No, the only reason I push back, and we love you. Right? The only reason I push back is I think that we're past the moment where we have to be putting people up on pedestals as if their stuff don't stink, and ours do. At the end of the day, we all have problems. Us just as much as anybody else. And it's an understanding of what those problems are that allows you to identify them. But then it's a desire, I think more than anything else, to see things improve. And not just to see things improve, but to do it together. You know what I mean? And to understand that, we rise, and fall, as a collective, so if she's weak and I'm strong, you know what I mean? Like, we crumble. And if I'm weak and she's strong, we crumble. The only way our family is sustainable is if all of us are strong. And if all of us are happy, if all of us are healthy, if all of us are taken care of, if all of us are mentally stable and all of that, so just being able to center that before anything else, I think is important, not just for us, but I think for anybody that's watching and listening. We don't have to, we can end this idea of trying to be perfect and trying to perform for an audience and just be real. You know what I mean? All of us are figuring things out as we go along, but none of us have it all figured out.
Right.
We struggle in the same ways, but hopefully we all have a desire, to be better, to keep trying, to keep fighting for the love and for the passion and the community that we all have to really come to fruition.
But how do you get that passion for a community? Because, there's one thing to have the passion for the development and, because I know that I need to be a better mom, a better grandmom, But how do we do that in a community for the children who may or may not have that kind of infrastructure that you're talking about,
We
right?
have to create it.
How
We
do we
can spend
create it?
time complaining about not having that structure. Like, for example, every single day, not even playing, every single day of the week, I Uber to the rec. And most of the times that I Uber through the rec, we end up taking the highway to nowhere. We end up going down the MLK, right? And as we're going down MLK, doesn't matter, white, black, Arab, Asian, the person's going to strike up a conversation and they're going to start talking about, the need to fix the city. And then they're going to start using our kids as their punching bag and talk about how the kids are just everything that's wrong with society right now and all of that. And usually by the time we get to Warwick off of MLK, I'm retorting about how you're just another person complaining about the problems, but what are you actually doing to contribute towards a solution?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You can ride down this highway to nowhere every single day and complain about the potholes, but are you actually calling any of your elected officials about those potholes and about the fact that the city dumped all of this money into this project that did nothing but divide Black and brown communities from, affluent white communities? You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, the
so
highway to nowhere, because they said y'all ain't coming out here.
Yeah. So is me complaining doing anything to help? Or am I just being another person that's contributing oxygen to the balloon that goes nowhere?
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, unless you're out here trying to work to find these lost children that you're always telling me exist, don't talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to hear it from you. You're not qualified to give me an opinion on that because you're part of the generation that lost them.
Wait, say that. Wait a minute.
We talk about that all the time, right? We talk about how all the kids are lost and this generation is falling. Who was supposed to raise them?
Right.
If we don't want to answer that question, I don't want to hear you talking about how lost they are. If you were a part of the generation that let our schools deteriorate the way that they have without reciprocity and kept on electing the same people that did it, I don't want to hear you talk about how bad our schools are unless you're actually willing to do what's necessary to fix them. So I think, like I said,
you saying that, I don't mean to cut you off, but like when you asked that question, Go, I thought of the question of, are leaders born or are they created, right? So like for what Aaron does, I think that's like an innate type of thing. Like he was born that way. He was born to be a leader. Everybody isn't going to be that way. But I also feel like
we have to hope that people decide.
I don't
interrupt
that.
I hope y'all know that this is also my family too. Y'all just so y'all know. Go ahead.
I don't think that people understand that we all have a responsibility in it. And you don't have to have this big wild dream or idea of how to fix something when it's really as simple as showing up to a meeting or making a phone call. Right.
I was getting to that. You ain't had to all the way.
It's all right, baby. You spoke enough. It's my turn. But it really is that simple. And I hope that more people become comfortable in knowing that sometimes their role doesn't have to be on the front lines. It just needs to be a phone call. Because if we get 600 phone calls or 1,000 phone calls, we're making progress together. It doesn't always have to be, oh, I need to be the chief and I need to do this program and I got this idea for this nonprofit, because we get nowhere. People overcomplicate how we can create change when it's really simple.
Right. Just do it.
Just do it.
Just do it.
And that's why I'm anti putting change agents, so to speak, up on a pedestal. Because what that does is, to some people, it allows you to look up to these people rather than across. You know what I mean? It allows you to say, oh, we should all aspire to be like this guy that is doing this great thing for this community that needs it. No, like we all should be helping that guy because we all see that this community needs it.
Period.
You know what I'm saying? Like, we shouldn't think that like this work is only for the privileged few that decide to call themselves activists. No, the activist is the person that makes that their life's pursuit. But every single day, we are all in a position to do something, whether that's volunteering time, whether that's mentoring, whether that's like Sam said, calling, emailing. Like, yo, I don't have the time to call and to email everybody when I'm showing up everywhere. So to the people that aren't spending their time going to these events and doing this, that, and the third, then call and email. You know what I mean? Like, we all have a social contract with each other to contribute towards improving our environment. I want to hand my kids a better society than the one I was handed by my parents and my grandparents and all of our ancestors, right? A part of that social contract is actually teaching one another how to go about achieving and acquiring the things that we need that we don't have. You know what I mean? Like, and we have to be handing them real tools in that war. And I feel like that we haven't been handing each other tangible tools that we can wield. We've been handing them hopes and prayers, which have contributed to sustaining us. But like, when all we believe in is hopes and prayers, we act like the real work don't have to get put in alongside. Like, faith, the same Bible says faith without works is dead.
That's exactly right.
But whenever we ask certain people about what needs to be done, they keep on talking about hoping and praying.
But there has to be somebody got to do something.
Right. Exactly.
Right. Somebody got to do something, because all this is, what is that song came out 100 years ago? Talking loud and saying nothing. And unless you come into the table doing something to assist these programs, to help affect change in these children's lives. I keep saying this over and over and over again. 1994-ish, the Department of Commerce, Ron Brown was the secretary. At that time, Larry Irvin was I want to say the assistant secretary or something like that of NTIA, National Telecommunication and Information Agency, part of Commerce. He wrote that report. It's called Falling Through the Net. It's still on the internet. And he coined the term digital divide. Now, from 1990 something, and I've got it printed down in one of these thousands of boxes, to right now, we're still talking about the digital divide in the public schools of Baltimore and in many underserved communities across this nation.
We're going to keep talking about it because we
can't keep talking about it. Somebody's got to do something.
Right. And that's my thing. Like, there comes a time where there's a reason why we take a census, you know what I mean? Every few years, you know what I'm saying? Like, every few years we have to take kind of like a step back and say, all right, what progress has been made? What losses have we taken? We have to take inventory, right? But in between those times of taking inventory, it's not time to sit back and assess. It's time to put our heads down and fight forward, and while I'm all the way in belief that we need to be fighting during that time, I think that a lot of times we don't have an organization behind that fight that really allows us to sustain ourselves. You know what I mean?
The infrastructure.
Exactly. Marching in the streets is great. You know what I mean? I've been there for years. So I will never tell anybody that us showing up and marching, has no effect whatsoever. But
however,
but the same way faith without works is dead, the march without the follow-up might as well not even have happened. Because after everybody gets done reading the think piece articles that come from saying, oh, this was great that these people did this, or I don't even agree with it in the first place, where's the follow-up? Where's the legislation? You know what I mean? Policy meetings. Where are the public forum discussions about how do we pressure our policymakers to vote in these issues? Like, where are the follow-ups to our public sector accountability folks, where we're saying, all right, well, we spend money with y'all. How are y'all going to pressure or support us in this endeavor? These are all things that without the organization piece, the action is cool, but where does
But
it
you
lead
can't
us?
affect change if you don't have an organized and infrastructure.
Exactly.
So we're coming down to the last minute. We've got to close out. Please give us how to contact you and Samara.
I know how to contact me, but I can't.
Y'all funny.
Well, you can find me on Facebook at Samara Jones or Instagram Andrea_Jo_.
Okay.
And if you're interested in the book, it's in Barnes and Nobles, not in the bookstore, but online. It's on Amazon and it's also on Lulu.
Okay.
And the easiest way to find it is to search my name because the title is long.
All right. And so I know you've got a ton of books, Mr. Maven.
Just type in Aaron Maven on any of your social media platforms or your Google search engine, and my website will come up. AaronMaven.com.
Just search my name, I'll come up.
Just, because I got it like that. That's what I do. That's what I love you both. This has been wonderful. And I just want you to know that we're doing this right now, but we're going to come back. We're going to circle back. I want to come back and continue this conversation. And we're coming up on summer. So before we hit summer, let's reconnect and have a couple of conversations about what we might be able to think about.
Go. Do you do the live streaming outside of the studio? Because maybe you can do a visit at the summer camp and see what they.
We'll talk about that offline.
Okay.
I would love to do it, but we'll talk about it offline.
Okay.
Okay, because there's some things, I'm sequestered during the pandemic. Don't y'all do it?
Got you. Hey, look, I understand.
But just bring the thing, and we can
Club
do it.
quarantine for go-go. We got it.
Yeah, we can make this happen. Y'all creative. That's why I love y'all. Y'all creative, and I'll be wherever. As long as the computer or the phone works, computer will travel. I'll be right there. We can do whatever we need to do straight from there. I would love to do that. Let's make that happen. I'm very serious about it. No joke here. Let's do that.
Sounds good.
I would absolutely love that. Okay.
It's great seeing
you.
Yes.
Thank you, Samara Jones and Aaron Maven. Get their books. These are this is a power couple for sure. And the babies are fabulous. I'm not going to show you all of them, but you got to see and get a little glimpse of their cutest buttons. So thank you so much for joining us.
Appreciate it. Thank you for having us.
We'll be in touch soon. Oh, this has been a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful show. Thank you all for joining us. And hopefully you'll tune in again next Tuesday at 7:00. And so it's from 7 to 9 every Tuesday. Thank you. And I'm Marsha Hughes. The show, if you'd like to get on the show, please email us at WKIM Media Network.MarshaHughes@gmail.com. Thank you so much. Good night.